I never thought the people who were supposed to love me most would watch me fall and choose my attacker's comfort over my pain. Blood pooled beneath my head as I lay crumpled at the bottom of the hospital's concrete stairwell, every breath sending lightning bolts through my shattered spine. My sister Bria stood at the top, her satisfied smirk visible even through my blurred vision. When our parents rushed past my broken body to embrace her, asking, "It was an accident, right, Bria?" I felt something die inside me that had nothing to do with my physical injuries. As Bria leaned down and whispered, "You deserved it." While they fussed over her fake tears, I didn't know that head nurse Patricia had witnessed everything from the security office and was already ensuring the cameras captured every horrifying second. The fluorescent lights above the emergency room ceiling became my universe as medical staff swarmed around my motionless body. "Doctor." Morgan's voice cut through the fog of pain medication as he delivered words that would reshape my entire existence. Complete spinal compression at the L2 vertebrae, immediate surgery required, paralysis from the waist down, potentially permanent. The clinical terms bounced around my skull like pinballs, while my parents stood in the corner, their arms wrapped protectively around Bria as she performed her Oscar-worthy display of trauma. "I can't believe this happened." Bria sobbed into our mother's shoulder, her voice carrying just the right amount of shock and guilt. "We were just walking down the stairs together and she must have tripped. I tried to catch her, but it happened so fast." Margaret smoothed Bria's perfectly styled blonde hair, the same hair I'd always envied growing up. "Nobody blames you, sweetheart. These things happen. Valerie's always been clumsy." Always been clumsy. The casual dismissal of my pain hit harder than the concrete had. I wanted to scream that I'd been a dancer for 15 years, that my body had never betrayed me until my own sister decided to destroy it, but the breathing tube prevented any sound from escaping. Robert paced between my gurney and Bria's chair, his expensive suit wrinkled from the stress of the evening. His law firm had trained him well in crisis management, but this wasn't a corporate scandal he could spin. Still, he tried. "The important thing is that everyone's going to be okay. Valerie's strong. She'll bounce back from this." Bounce back. As if I could bounce anywhere with a severed spinal cord. Dr. Morgan approached my parents with surgical consent forms, his expression grave. "We need to operate immediately to relieve the pressure on her spinal cord. There's significant swelling and every minute counts if we want to preserve any function below the injury site." "Of course, whatever she needs," Margaret said, though her eyes never left Bria's face. "We'll sign anything." The irony wasn't lost on me. They'd sign papers to try to fix what their favorite daughter had deliberately broken, all while comforting the perpetrator and ignoring the victim. As they wheeled me toward the operating room, I caught sight of a woman in scrubs standing near the nurse's station. She had steel gray hair pulled back in a severe bun and sharp blue eyes that seemed to miss nothing. When our gazes met, something passed between us. Recognition, maybe, or understanding. Physical therapist Janet Rodriguez introduced herself as they prepped me for surgery, her warm brown eyes radiating competence and compassion. "I'll be working with you during recovery, Valerie. I want you to know that spinal injuries don't define the person. We're going to fight this together." Fight. The word lodged in my brain as the anesthesia pulled me under. I'd been fighting my whole life, but always the wrong battles. Fighting for my parents' attention, fighting to prove I was worthy of love, fighting to convince everyone that Bria wasn't the angel they believed her to be. Now I'd be fighting to walk again, to reclaim a life my sister had tried to steal with one calculated push. The last thing I remembered before consciousness faded was Bria's voice drifting through the surgical suite doors. "I just feel so guilty. If only I'd been able to save her." Recovery unfolded like a slow-motion nightmare punctuated by flashes of unwanted clarity. Physical therapy sessions with Janet became my anchor to sanity as buried memories surfaced like oil slicks on disturbed water. The science fair project I'd worked on for months destroyed the night before, judging when Bria accidentally knocked over my volcano display. The scholarship letter from Northwestern that mysteriously vanished from our mailbox, only for Bria to receive an identical opportunity the following year. Jake Morrison, my high school boyfriend who dumped me after Bria convinced him I'd been cheating with his best friend. Trauma has a way of unlocking suppressed memories, Janet explained as she guided my legs through range of motion exercises. Your mind protected you by compartmentalizing these experiences, but now your body's forced stillness is allowing your psyche to process what really happened. Janet's office became my confessional. She listened without judgment as I recounted decades of systematically destroyed opportunities, relationships sabotaged by whispered lies and achievements diminished by Bria's superior performances. Each session revealed another layer of manipulation I'd been too desperate for family harmony to acknowledge. It's called scapegoating, Janet said during one particularly difficult session. In dysfunctional family systems, one child becomes the repository for all the family's problems, while another is idealized beyond reason. The golden child can do no wrong, while the scapegoat can do no right. Golden child. The term fit Bria perfectly. She'd been our parents' princess from birth, blessed with natural charisma, academic excellence, and the kind of effortless beauty that opened doors before she even knocked. I'd been the afterthought, the daughter who tried too hard, cared too much, and somehow always fell short of their impossible standards. My parents visited daily, but their attention remained laser-focused on managing Bria's trauma. They brought her favorite coffee-arranged counseling sessions to help her cope with witnessing my accident, and constantly reassured her that nobody held her responsible for my clumsiness. Poor Bria's been having nightmares. Margaret confided during one visit while my sister sat in the corner, dabbing her eyes with tissues. She keeps reliving that terrible moment when she couldn't save you. Couldn't save me. The rewriting of history happened in real time, each retelling further cementing Bria's position as the grieving hero rather than the calculating perpetrator. Bria's visits followed a predictable pattern. She'd arrive with flowers and concern, performing sympathy for any medical staff within earshot. But the moment we were alone, her mask would slip just enough to reveal the satisfaction underneath. "I brought you roses," she announced one afternoon, setting a beautiful bouquet on my bedside table. "They reminded me of you, pretty on the surface but full of thorns." As I reached for them, hidden thorns embedded beneath the stems scratched deep gouges across my palms, drawing blood that spotted the pristine white sheets. Bria watched with barely concealed glee as I struggled to stanch the bleeding with one hand while calling for help. "Oh no, you're hurt," she said loudly as Janet rushed in. "The thorns must have been damaged during transport. I'm so sorry, Valerie." Janet cleaned my wounds while shooting suspicious glances at Bria, who maintained her concerned sister facade perfectly. But I caught the way Janet's jaw tightened, the way her movements became more protective. She was beginning to see what I'd been seeing my whole life. Head nurse Patricia began appearing more frequently during Bria's visits, always finding reasons to check equipment or review charts. Her presence seemed to make Bria nervous, though she covered it well with increased displays of sisterly devotion. "Your sister certainly is attentive," Patricia observed one evening after Bria left. "She's here every day without fail." "She's always been dedicated to family," I replied carefully, unsure how much to reveal. Patricia's sharp blue eyes studied my face for a long moment. "Sometimes the people who appear most caring are the ones we need to watch most closely," she said cryptically, before returning to her rounds. The hospital room became my world, its beige walls and antiseptic smell defining the boundaries of my new existence. Wheelchair training started 3 weeks post-surgery each session, a humbling reminder of how completely my life had changed. The simplest tasks required relearning, transferring from bed to chair, navigating doorways, managing basic hygiene without assistance. But worse than the physical challenges was the emotional isolation. My parents' visits felt like obligations fulfilled rather than expressions of love. They'd spend 30 minutes updating me on Bria's progress in therapy before rushing back to comfort their traumatized princess. Phone calls from extended family focused on how the family was coping with this tragedy that had befallen poor Bria. Nobody asked how I was coping with being nearly murdered by my own sister. 3 weeks after my surgery, Patricia appeared at my bedside during the quiet hours of the night shift. The usual bustle of daytime medical activity had settled into the gentle hum of machines monitoring sleeping patients. She pulled a chair close to my bed and spoke in low tones that wouldn't carry beyond my room's walls. "Valerie, I need to discuss something important with you, and I want you to listen carefully before you respond." Her voice carried the weight of years spent delivering difficult news to patients and families. "I've been working in hospitals for 32 years, and I've developed a sense about people. What I witnessed the night you were injured doesn't match the story your family has been telling." My heart rate monitor began beeping faster as adrenaline flooded my system. Patricia glanced at the screen, then back at my face. I was in the security office reviewing footage from another incident when I heard shouting in the stairwell. "I looked at the monitor just as your sister positioned herself behind you." Patricia paused, letting the weight of her words settle. "Valerie, I watched her check the hallway to ensure you were alone. I watched her calculate the angle. I watched her place her hands on your back and push you down those concrete stairs with deliberate force." The room tilted despite my horizontal position. Someone had witnessed the truth. After weeks of gaslighting and manipulation, someone had seen what really happened. The audio picked up her comment afterward. Patricia continued. "We have clear recording of her saying, 'You deserved it,' while you lay unconscious and bleeding. Tears I'd been holding back for weeks finally spilled over. Not tears of sadness, but of relief. Validation. Proof that I wasn't crazy, wasn't imagining the malice I'd sensed my entire life." "Why are you telling me this?" I whispered. "Because I've spent 3 decades watching families destroy themselves, protecting abusers, while sacrificing victims. I've seen too many people suffer in silence because the truth was inconvenient for everyone else." Patricia's voice hardened with resolve. "But also because this is attempted murder, not a family dispute. Your sister deliberately tried to kill you, and she's been performing innocence while your parents enable her lies." The clinical term hit like ice water. Attempted murder. Not sibling rivalry or accidental injury, but calculated violence designed to end my life. "What happens if I report this?" I asked. "Hospital protocol requires me to contact police if I suspect a patient was the victim of assault. I've already backed up the security footage in multiple locations to prevent tampering, but I need your permission to proceed officially." My mind raced through implications. Reporting would destroy any remaining relationship with my parents who'd already chosen Bria's comfort over my truth. It would drag our family dysfunction into public view. It would force me to relive the trauma in courtrooms and police stations. But it would also mean justice, accountability, protection for future victims of Bria's escalating violence. "I need time to think," I said finally. Patricia nodded. "I understand this is overwhelming, but Valerie, I've seen patterns like this before. Violence that starts with emotional manipulation escalates to physical harm, then attempted murder. If she was willing to do this in a public place with cameras and witnesses nearby, imagine what she's capable of when she feels more confident in her ability to avoid consequences." She stood to leave, then turned back one final time. "I've copied the footage to secure servers that your family can't access even with their legal connections. Whatever you decide, the evidence will be preserved. But don't wait too long. Every day that passes gives her more opportunities to harm you or someone else." After Patricia left, I stared at the ceiling tiles and tried to process this seismic shift in my understanding of that night. I'd known Bria pushed me deliberately, but having objective proof felt different from my own traumatic memories. This wasn't my word against hers anymore. This was documented evidence of attempted murder. The night stretched endlessly as I wrestled with the decision that would reshape all our lives. By morning, I knew what I had to do. Detective Sarah Williams arrived at my hospital room on a gray Tuesday morning, carrying herself with the quiet authority of someone accustomed to delivering difficult truths. She was younger than I'd expected, maybe 35, with shoulder-length auburn hair and intelligent green eyes that suggested she'd seen enough family violence to recognize the patterns immediately. "Ms. Thompson, I'm Detective Williams with the Metro Police Family Violence Unit. Nurse Patricia Martinez filed a report concerning the circumstances of your injury. I'd like to hear your account of what happened that night." As I recounted the events leading up to Bria's attack, Detective Williams took detailed notes without interrupting. When I finished, she set down her pen and leaned forward slightly. "Valerie, I need to share some information that might be difficult to hear. During our preliminary investigation into your sister's background, we discovered this isn't her first incident involving assault." My stomach dropped. "What do you mean?" "Bria has been arrested twice previously. Once during her senior year of high school for attacking a classmate who received a scholarship she wanted. The charges were dropped after your father's firm negotiated a settlement. The second incident occurred during her sophomore year at State University. She assaulted her roommate with a lacrosse stick, sending the girl to the emergency room with a concussion. The hospital room felt like it was shrinking around me. I never knew about any of this. The records were sealed and significant money changed hands to keep both incidents out of the media. Your father's position at Henderson Kravitz and Associates provided access to expensive criminal defense attorneys who specialize in making problems disappear for wealthy clients. Detective Williams opened a manila folder and spread several documents across my bedside table. Police reports, medical records, witness statements. A pattern of escalating violence that my parents had systematically concealed. Your mother's family has political connections throughout the state. Her brother serves on the university's board of trustees, which explains how Bria avoided expulsion after the second incident. They've been protecting her reputation and criminal history for years, while positioning her as the victim in family conflicts. The revelation reframed my entire childhood. Every time I'd tried to tell our parents about Bria's cruelty, they'd dismissed my concerns as sibling jealousy. But they'd known. They'd known she was dangerous and had chosen to protect her image rather than address her behavior. The pattern suggests your sister suffers from antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features, Detective Williams continued. People with this condition often target family members first because they're easiest to manipulate and least likely to report abuse. They escalate, gradually testing boundaries until they feel confident they can commit serious crimes without consequences. Hospital social worker Catherine Mills joined our meeting, her kind face radiating the competence that comes from years of advocating for vulnerable patients. She'd been working with victims of family violence long enough to understand the unique challenges of prosecuting relatives. "Valerie, I want you to understand that proceeding with charges against your sister will likely strain your relationship with your parents," Catherine said gently. "Families often close ranks around the perpetrator, especially when that person has been favored throughout their life. You need to prepare yourself for the possibility that they'll blame you for destroying family unity." "They're already blaming me," I replied. "They spent 3 weeks comforting my attacker while I learned to function with a severed spine." Detective Williams reviewed the security footage on her laptop, pointing out details that confirmed premeditation. "Notice how she checks both directions before positioning herself behind you. She waits until you're focused on the conversation with your father, then calculates the angle for maximum impact. This wasn't impulse violence. This was planned execution." The clinical analysis of my near murder felt surreal. Watching my sister's deliberate movements on screen drove home the reality that someone I'd shared a childhood with had calmly decided to end my life. Multiple hospital staff members have provided statements about her behavior during visits, Detective Williams added. The consensus is that her grief and concern appeared performative rather than genuine. Several nurses reported feeling uncomfortable with her interactions with you. Patricia appeared in the doorway, still in her scrubs from the night shift. I wanted to check how the meeting was progressing. Has Valerie seen the full footage yet? Detective Williams looked at me questioningly. Are you ready to view the complete security recording? I nodded, though my hands trembled as she positioned the laptop screen where I could see clearly. The timestamp showed 11:47 p.m. on the night that changed everything. The camera angle captured the entire stairwell, providing an unobstructed view of Bria's calculated attack. Watching my own attempted murder felt like an out-of-body experience. The footage showed Bria's cold calculation, the deliberate checking of the hallway, the precise positioning behind my wheelchair, and the violent shove that sent me tumbling down concrete stairs. But most chilling was her reaction afterward. No immediate rush to help, no panic or regret, just satisfaction as she watched me lie motionless at the bottom. We have enough evidence for attempted murder charges, Detective Williams said as she closed the laptop, but I want to prepare you for what comes next. Your family will likely hire expensive attorneys who'll try to discredit your testimony and the evidence. They'll claim this was an accident, that the security footage is misleading, that you're unstable and vindictive. Are you prepared for that level of scrutiny and attack? I thought about the decades of gaslighting, the systematic destruction of my achievements, the family gatherings where I'd been treated as the problem while Bria basked in adoration. I thought about lying paralyzed in a hospital bed while my parents comforted my attacker. I'm ready, I said. It's time someone held her accountable for what she's done. The phone call came at 7 a.m. the next morning, Margaret's voice trembling with a rage I'd never heard before. How could you do this to us, Valerie? How could you destroy your own family with these horrible lies? Detective Williams had contacted my parents the previous evening to inform them of the investigation and impending charges. Their reaction followed exactly the pattern she'd predicted: complete denial, followed by vicious attacks on my credibility and motives. I want to see you immediately, Margaret continued. Your father and I are driving to the hospital right now, and you're going to put an end to this nonsense before it goes any further. The line went dead before I could respond. I'd expected their anger, but the cold fury in my mother's voice suggested something deeper than disappointment. This felt like war. They arrived within the hour, their usual polished appearances, slightly disheveled from stress and lack of sleep. Robert's expensive suit was wrinkled, his tie askew. Margaret's perfectly applied makeup couldn't quite conceal the dark circles under her eyes, but it was Bria's presence that sent ice through my veins. She stood behind them wearing designer clothes and the expression of wounded innocence that would have been convincing to anyone who hadn't seen the security footage. Explain yourself, Robert demanded without preamble. Explain how you can accuse your own sister of attempted murder when she's done nothing but support you through this tragedy. The word tragedy hung in the air like poison gas, as if my attack had been some natural disaster rather than a calculated assault by his favored daughter. I didn't accuse her of anything, I replied calmly. The security cameras recorded what happened. The police are simply following the evidence. Margaret's face contorted with disbelief. Evidence? What evidence could there possibly be? Bria was devastated when you fell. She's been in therapy trying to cope with the guilt of not being able to save you. Mom, I know this is hard to accept, but Bria pushed me down those stairs deliberately. The hospital has video footage that shows exactly what happened. That's impossible, Bria interjected, her voice breaking with perfectly calculated emotion. I would never hurt you, Valerie. We may have had our differences over the years, but you're my sister. I love you. The performance was flawless. If I hadn't lived through decades of her manipulation, if I hadn't seen her cold satisfaction as I lay bleeding, I might have believed her myself. Robert pulled out his phone and made a quick call. Henderson, Kravitz and Associates. Put me through to Marcus. He walked to the window while speaking in low tones with what I assumed was his law firm's criminal defense division. This is what's going to happen, he announced after ending the call. You're going to call that detective and tell her you were confused by your medications. You're going to admit that you don't actually remember what happened clearly and you want to withdraw your statement. I'm not doing that. Yes, you are. Because if you persist with this vindictive fantasy, you'll no longer be our daughter. We'll cut off all contact, remove you from our will, and make sure everyone in this town knows that you tried to destroy your innocent sister with false accusations. The ultimatum landed like a physical blow. They were willing to disown me to protect Bria's reputation. After 28 years of trying to earn their love, I was finally seeing the truth about what I meant to them. Margaret stepped closer to my bed, her voice dropping to a venomous whisper. You've always been jealous of Bria, always resented her success, her beauty, her achievements. Now you're using this accident to finally try to destroy her, and we won't allow it. It wasn't an accident. It was an accident, she hissed, and if you know what's good for you, you'll remember it that way. Bria moved to stand beside our parents, completing their united front against me. The symbolism wasn't lost on any of us, 3 against 1, just like it had always been. I never wanted to hurt you, Val, Bria said, using the childhood nickname she hadn't spoken in years. But if you're going to try to send me to prison for something I didn't do, I can't just stand by and let you destroy my life. Your life. The words exploded out of me. Your life, I'm the one who's paralyzed. I'm the one lying in a hospital bed learning to use a wheelchair because you decided to push me down concrete stairs. You fell, Robert said firmly. The official story is that you fell due to your own clumsiness, and that's what it will remain. End of discussion. Patricia appeared in the doorway, her timing impeccable. I'm sorry to interrupt, but visiting hours have specific guidelines about patient welfare and stress levels. She'd obviously been listening from the hallway, waiting for the right moment to intervene. The tension in the room was thick enough to cut with a scalpel. We're having a family discussion, Margaret snapped. I understand, but my responsibility is to my patient's medical needs. Valerie's blood pressure and heart rate are elevated to concerning levels. I'm going to need you to lower your voices or continue this conversation in the family lounge. This is ridiculous, Robert muttered, but he stepped back from my bed. Patricia's presence seemed to remind my family that they were being watched, that their private dysfunction was now subject to professional scrutiny. They moderated their tone, but not their message. Think about what we've told you, Margaret said as they prepared to leave. You have 24 hours to come to your senses and do the right thing for this family. After they left, Bria lingered for a moment. When she was sure Patricia had moved out of earshot, she leaned close to my ear. I should have pushed harder, she whispered. Next time, I won't leave anything to chance. The threat sent chills down my spine, or would have if I could still feel anything below my waist. She was already planning her next attack, confident that our parents would continue protecting her regardless of the evidence. Patricia returned after my family disappeared down the hallway. I heard enough of that conversation to understand the pressure you're under, but I want you to know something important. I've been documenting every interaction your sister has had with you since the incident. Her behavior, her comments, her emotional responses. None of it matches someone who accidentally injured a beloved family member. They're going to disown me if I don't recant, I said. Then they were never really your family to begin with, Patricia replied with characteristic directness. Real families protect victims, not perpetrators. Real families seek justice, not cover-ups. She was right, but that didn't make the choice any easier. I was about to lose everything I'd ever known in pursuit of something I'd never had parents who actually loved me more than their public image. Detective Williams called that afternoon to check on my resolution after the family meeting. How are you holding up after seeing your parents? They want me to recant my statement and withdraw the charges. Are you planning to do that? I stared out the hospital window at the parking lot where families came and went visiting loved ones who mattered to them. No, I'm going to see this through. Good, because I have some additional information that might interest you. During our investigation into your sister's background, we discovered she's currently under investigation by her university for academic fraud. Apparently, she's been paying other students to write her papers and take her exams for the past 2 years. Another layer of deception peeled away. Even her academic achievements, the accomplishments our parents praised constantly, were built on lies and manipulation. There's more. We ran a complete background check and found sealed juvenile records, 3 incidents of animal cruelty between ages 12 and 15, a pattern of escalating violence that your parents managed to keep quiet through their connections. Animal cruelty. The progression was textbook childhood violence toward animals escalating to assault on peers, culminating in attempted murder of family members. Bria wasn't just my abusive sister. She was a dangerous sociopath whose violence had been enabled and concealed by wealthy, connected parents who valued reputation over safety. "I'm ready to proceed with the charges," I told Detective Williams, "whatever it takes." The attempted hack happened 3 days after my confrontation with my family, discovered by the hospital's IT security team during routine monitoring. Someone had tried to access my medical records using stolen credentials from a psychiatric nurse who'd been on vacation in Florida for the past week. The intrusion attempt was sophisticated, but not quite sophisticated enough, explained IT Director Marcus Webb as he showed Detective Williams and me the digital evidence on his laptop. Whoever did this had detailed knowledge of our system architecture and specific information about employee access codes. Detective Williams studied the forensic trail with the focused attention of someone who'd seen similar crimes before. The attempt originated from a device registered to Bria Thompson. She used stolen credentials to try accessing Valerie's psychiatric evaluation records from her initial admission. My blood ran cold. I haven't had any psychiatric evaluations. Exactly. But if someone could fabricate entries showing mental instability, suicidal ideation, or delusional thinking, it would provide grounds to discredit your testimony about the assault. Marcus pulled up additional logs showing the full scope of Bria's digital intrusion attempt. She was specifically targeting records that would suggest you'd been experiencing paranoid delusions or had a history of making false accusations against family members. When she couldn't find existing records that fit her narrative, she attempted to create new entries backdated to your admission date. The calculated nature of the plan revealed a level of criminal sophistication that went far beyond sibling rivalry. Bria had researched legal strategies, studied hospital computer systems, and developed a comprehensive scheme to destroy my credibility before the case reached trial. This adds computer fraud and identity theft to the charges, Detective Williams noted. But more importantly, it demonstrates consciousness of guilt. Innocent people don't fabricate evidence to discredit their accusers. Catherine Mills joined our meeting, bringing case files from similar family violence situations she'd handled over the years. Digital evidence tampering has become increasingly common in domestic abuse cases. Perpetrators understand that attacking the victim's mental health is often more effective than denying the crime itself. What would have happened if she'd succeeded in planting the fake records? I asked. Defense attorneys would have argued that you were unstable and vindictive, that your accusations against your sister were manifestations of delusional thinking exacerbated by traumatic brain injury, Catherine explained. Juries are often reluctant to convict family members based on testimony from victims with documented psychiatric issues. Detective Williams obtained a search warrant for Bria's electronic devices based on the hacking evidence. The results exceeded even her expectations for discovering premeditation. Bria's phone contained months of research into spinal injury mechanisms, hospital security systems, and legal precedents for family violence cases. She studied anatomy charts focusing on spinal column vulnerabilities. Detective Williams reported during our next meeting. Her browser history shows extensive research into paralysis-causing injuries and their long-term prognoses. She knew exactly where and how to push you to cause maximum damage. The phone also contained detailed notes about hospital staff schedules, security camera angles, and my daily therapy appointments. Bria had been planning this attack for months, waiting for the perfect opportunity when she could act without witnesses. Most disturbing is what we found in her notes app. Detective Williams continued. She'd been tracking your inheritance prospects, researching your grandmother's will, and calculating how much she stood to gain financially if you were permanently disabled or dead. The financial motive added another dimension to the attempted murder charges. This wasn't just sibling rivalry or psychological dominance. Bria had tried to kill me for money. Your grandmother's will leaves equal shares to both granddaughters, but includes provisions that transfer a deceased beneficiary's portion to the surviving sister. Bria stood to inherit over $800,000 if you died. The revelation reframed every interaction we'd had since our grandmother's funeral 2 years earlier. Bria's increased hostility, her efforts to isolate me from extended family, her attempts to convince our parents that I was unstable. She'd been laying groundwork for my elimination while positioning herself to inherit my share of the family wealth. Patricia arrived with additional evidence that painted an even darker picture of Bria's planning. I've been reviewing security footage from your sister's previous visits to the hospital. She made multiple reconnaissance trips before your admission, studying the layout and identifying the stairwell she ultimately used for the attack. The footage showed Bria walking through hospital corridors with the focused attention of someone conducting surveillance. She'd timed security guard rotations, identified blind spots in camera coverage, and selected the stairwell specifically because it provided the best combination of concrete surfaces and relative privacy. She also attempted to access restricted areas on several occasions, Patricia added. Security stopped her twice trying to enter the medication storage room and once attempting to reach the psychiatric ward where patient records are kept. The picture emerging from the investigation revealed a level of criminal planning that prosecutors typically associated with professional killers rather than family members. Bria hadn't acted in anger or passion. She'd conducted months of careful preparation for a calculated execution disguised as an accident. We found additional concerning evidence in her dorm room, Detective Williams continued. Books on inheritance law articles about successfully staging accidents and printouts of insurance policy details for your parents' coverage on both daughters. Dr. Torres, the neurologist who'd been monitoring my recovery, joined our meeting to provide medical testimony about the attack's precision. The impact pattern on Valerie's spine suggests the person who pushed her had specific knowledge about spinal column anatomy. This wasn't a random shove. The force was directed at exactly the right angle to cause maximum damage to the L2 vertebrae. Is that something a pre-med student would learn? Detective Williams asked. Absolutely. Bria completed 2 years of medical courses before switching to business. She would have studied spinal anatomy in detail during her human biology and physiology classes. The evidence painted a terrifying portrait of premeditated attempted murder, executed with clinical precision. But perhaps most chilling was the realization that if Patricia hadn't been monitoring the security cameras that night, Bria's plan would have succeeded perfectly. I would have been dismissed as another clumsy accident victim, while my sister inherited my share of the family wealth and eliminated her primary competition for our parents' affection. The prosecution is confident they can secure convictions on all charges, Detective Williams told me. Attempted murder, computer fraud, identity theft, and financial conspiracy. But I want to prepare you for what your family's response will be when they realize how much evidence we've gathered. I didn't have to wait long to find out. Emma Rodriguez arrived at my hospital room on a rainy Thursday afternoon, her dark hair dripping from the downpour and her brown eyes filled with an emotion I hadn't seen in years, genuine concern for my well-being. We'd been best friends throughout high school until she'd suddenly stopped coming around during senior year, a disappearance I'd never fully understood. I heard about what happened through Jessica Chen's mom, she said, settling into the visitor chair with the careful movements of someone preparing to deliver difficult news. Val, I need to tell you something I should have said 15 years ago, and I hate myself for staying silent this long. Emma's hands trembled as she pulled out her phone and showed me a photo from our high school graduation party. The image captured a moment I'd completely forgotten: Bria, standing behind me at the top of our deck stairs, her hands positioned on my back in a gesture that looked affectionate to casual observers, but suggested something more sinister in light of recent events. "I was taking random pictures that night when I saw Bria deliberately push you down those deck stairs," Emma said, her voice thick with guilt and regret. "You hit your head on the concrete patio and were unconscious for almost 10 minutes. When you woke up, you didn't remember what happened, and Bria immediately started telling everyone you'd tripped over your graduation gown." The memory surfaced in fragments: the graduation party, the celebration atmosphere, the sudden sensation of falling, waking up on the patio with a splitting headache while everyone fussed over my clumsiness. I tried to tell your mom what I'd seen, but she accused me of being jealous of Bria and trying to cause trouble during a family celebration. She said if I continued spreading malicious rumors, she'd have your father sue my family for defamation. Emma's confession explained her sudden absence from my life. While I'd been wondering what I'd done wrong to lose my best friend, she'd been threatened into silence by my own mother. "I was 17 and terrified," Emma continued. "My dad had just started his landscaping business, and we couldn't afford legal battles with prominent families. I convinced myself that maybe I'd misunderstood what I saw, that maybe it really had been an accident." "But you took a photo." "I did, and I've kept it all these years, hoping I'd never need to use it, but knowing it might be important someday." Emma's voice broke. "I abandoned you when you needed support most, and I've regretted it every single day since." The photo on Emma's phone showed Bria's deliberate positioning, the calculated angle of her hands, the cold satisfaction on her face as I tumbled down the stairs. Even 15 years later, the image captured the same predatory expression I'd seen moments before my recent attack. "There's more," Emma said. "After your mom threatened me, I started paying attention to Bria's behavior around other people. I documented 3 more incidents where she deliberately harmed classmates and then played innocent when adults investigated." Emma showed me a notebook she'd kept throughout senior year filled with detailed observations of Bria's manipulative tactics. Instances of spreading malicious rumors, sabotaging other students' projects, and creating elaborate scenarios designed to make her targets appear unstable or vindictive. Jennifer Walsh's science project caught fire the night before the state competition. The investigation ruled it an electrical accident, but I saw Bria in the chemistry lab after hours the previous evening. Mark Stevens got food poisoning from lunch he brought from home on the day of college interviews. His mom found bleach residue in his thermos afterward. The pattern revealed a level of systematic cruelty that went far beyond typical teenage meanness. Bria had been destroying people's opportunities and safety for years, while maintaining her reputation as the perfect student and daughter. Patricia knocked on my doorframe before entering, her expression brightening when she saw Emma. "I hope I'm not interrupting. I wanted to check on Valerie's emotional state before the next phase of the investigation." "Actually, you should hear this," I told Patricia. "Emma has evidence about Bria's previous attacks that nobody ever reported." Patricia listened intently as Emma shared her documentation, taking notes and asking clarifying questions with the thoroughness of someone who understood the legal implications of each detail. "This establishes a clear pattern of behavior dating back 15 years, Patricia said when Emma finished. "Would you be willing to provide a formal statement to Detective Williams?" "Absolutely. I should have done this years ago." Catherine Mills arrived shortly after Patricia called her, bringing resources about support networks for long-term abuse survivors. Family violence often involves years of psychological conditioning that makes victims question their own perceptions, she explained. "Having outside witnesses validate your experiences is crucial for healing." Emma's revelation opened floodgates of memory and emotion I'd been suppressing for decades. The seemingly random accidents, the destroyed opportunities, the gaslighting that made me question my own judgment. Each incident now viewed through the lens of deliberate sabotage rather than unfortunate coincidence. I've been researching support groups for adult survivors of sibling abuse, Catherine continued. It's more common than people realize but rarely discussed because society expects family loyalty regardless of how toxic the relationships become. The support group met twice weekly in the hospital's community room, bringing together people whose experiences mirrored my own in heartbreaking detail. Sarah Chen shared stories of a brother who'd systematically destroyed her achievements throughout childhood. Marcus Johnson described years of physical violence from a sister who was praised as the family's golden child, while he was blamed for provoking her attacks. The hardest part is accepting that your own parents chose to protect your abuser instead of you, explained group facilitator Dr. Rebecca Martinez. It forces you to confront the reality that their love was conditional on your silence and compliance. Emma started attending sessions with me using her own guilt and regret as motivation to support other victims who'd been abandoned by friends and family. Her presence provided concrete proof that people could choose differently, could prioritize truth over convenience and justice over family loyalty. I'm testifying at Bria's trial, Emma announced during one session. Not just about the graduation party incident, but about everything I witnessed and failed to report. If my testimony can prevent her from hurting anyone else, then maybe I can finally make amends for staying silent so long. The support network expanded beyond the hospital group as word spread about the case. Dr. Amanda Foster, a forensic psychologist who specialized in family violence, offered to provide expert testimony about sibling abuse patterns. Legal aid attorney Marcus Webb volunteered to ensure I had proper representation regardless of my family's wealth and connections. Cases like yours are why I became a prosecutor. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh told me during our first meeting, when privileged families use their resources to enable dangerous behavior instead of addressing it, the justice system becomes the only avenue for protecting future victims. The irony of her name wasn't lost on me. Jennifer Walsh had been one of Bria's high school victims, though I didn't realize the connection until Emma pointed it out. Her science project fire had cost her a full scholarship to MIT, but she'd channeled that injustice into a career fighting for other victims. Your sister destroyed my academic future 15 years ago, Jennifer said with quiet determination. But it led me to a career where I can ensure she faces consequences for all the lives she's damaged. The web of support continued growing as more of Bria's former victims found the courage to come forward. High school classmates, college roommates, co-workers from her various internships. Each person carried scars from encounters with my sister's calculated cruelty, and each was ready to ensure she couldn't hurt anyone else. For the first time in my life, I wasn't fighting Bria alone. Attorney Amanda Foster entered my hospital room carrying the kind of confidence that comes from years of winning impossible cases against powerful defendants. She'd built her reputation representing victims of family violence, particularly cases where wealthy perpetrators use their resources to escape accountability. Her track record included successful prosecutions of business executives, politicians, and other prominent figures who'd assumed their status made them untouchable. Before we discuss legal strategy, I want to review the financial aspects of this case, Amanda said, spreading documents across my bedside table. Your family's wealth and connections present both challenges and opportunities for prosecution. The financial review revealed irregularities that added new dimensions to the criminal charges. My grandmother's trust fund, established when I turned 18, had been systematically plundered over the past decade. What should have contained nearly $300,000 now held less than $50,000. Your parents have been withdrawing money using their positions as trust administrators. Amanda explained, highlighting withdrawal records that painted a damning picture of financial exploitation. Every major expense in Bria's life has been funded from your inheritance. Private school tuition, college expenses, legal fees for her previous assault charges, even her luxury car payments. The theft had been methodical and ongoing. $60,000 for Bria's private high school, $80,000 for her college tuition and expenses, $45,000 for legal representation when she assaulted her college roommate, $15,000 for the car she'd received as a graduation gift, while I'd worked 2 jobs to afford my used Honda. They've essentially stolen your inheritance to fund their protection of your sister's criminal behavior, Amanda continued. This adds financial elder abuse and theft charges to the growing list of crimes your family has committed. The revelation reframed every financial struggle I'd endured throughout my 20s. Student loans I'd assumed were necessary because my family couldn't afford to help with education. The second job I'd worked to save for a reliable car. The studio apartment I'd rented because I couldn't afford anything larger. All while my own inheritance money funded my sister's privileged lifestyle and legal protection. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh joined our meeting to discuss the prosecution's strategy for handling such a complex web of crimes. We're dealing with attempted murder, computer fraud, identity, theft, financial exploitation, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. The challenge is presenting this information to a jury in a way that emphasizes the pattern without overwhelming them with details. The financial crimes actually strengthen the attempted murder case, Amanda pointed out. They establish clear motive beyond sibling rivalry. Bria stood to inherit hundreds of thousands of dollars if Valerie died, and she'd already been stealing from the trust fund to support her lifestyle. Jennifer spread out a timeline showing the escalation of Bria's criminal behavior alongside the trust fund withdrawals. The correlation is striking. Every time she needed money for legal fees or other expenses, your parents would access your inheritance. When that source became insufficient to support her increasingly expensive problems, she escalated to attempting murder for the insurance money and full inheritance. The insurance revelation added another layer to the financial motive. My parents had increased their life insurance coverage on both daughters to $500,000 each just 6 months before the attack. Bria would have received my full policy payout in addition to my share of the trust fund and eventual inheritance from our parents' estate. She researched the insurance policy details extensively. Detective Williams reported during her update on the digital evidence. Her computer showed multiple searches for policy terms, beneficiary arrangements, and claim procedures. She knew exactly how much money my death would generate. The prosecution team outlined their strategy for presenting the case to a jury, opening with the security footage to establish the brutal nature of the attack, then building the foundation of premeditation through digital evidence and financial motive, finally demonstrating the pattern of violence and family enablement through witness testimony. We have 17 witnesses prepared to testify about Bria's history of violence and manipulation, Jennifer explained. High school classmates, college roommates, hospital staff, and family friends who witnessed her behavior over the years. Each testimony adds another piece to the puzzle showing this wasn't an isolated incident. Expert witnesses would provide context about family violence patterns, spinal injury mechanics, and digital forensics. Dr. Rebecca Martinez would explain how golden child dynamics enable escalating abuse. Dr. Torres would demonstrate the medical precision required to cause my specific injuries. IT Director Marcus Webb would walk the jury through Bria's sophisticated attempt to hack hospital records. The defense will likely argue that this was an accident, that the security footage is misleading, and that family tensions have created false memories and vindictive accusations, Amanda predicted. They'll attack your credibility by suggesting you're emotionally unstable due to your injuries and medications. Which is exactly why Bria tried to plant fake psychiatric records, Jennifer added. She understood that undermining your credibility was essential to her defense strategy. The prosecution's counter-strategy involved extensive documentation of my mental state throughout the investigation. Multiple psychological evaluations confirmed my stability and competence. Medical records showed no indication of delusional thinking or false memory formation. Character witnesses would testify to my reliability and truthfulness throughout my life. We're also presenting evidence about your family's wealth and connections to show how they've escaped accountability in the past, Amanda explained. The jury needs to understand that this isn't the first time they've used their resources to protect Bria from consequences. the sealed juvenile records for animal cruelty, the covered-up high school assault, the expunged college incident. Each case showed a pattern of escalating violence, followed by expensive legal intervention that made the problems disappear from public record. Your father's law firm specializes in crisis management for wealthy clients, Jennifer noted. They have extensive experience making criminal charges disappear through plea bargains, sealed records, and financial settlements that silence victims. The jury will see how this family operates. But the most compelling evidence remained the security footage and Bria's own digital trail. No amount of legal maneuvering could explain away the calculated nature of her attack or the extensive planning she'd done beforehand. The attempted hospital record hack was actually the best thing that could have happened for our case, Amanda said. It demonstrates consciousness of guilt so clearly that even the most skilled defense attorney will struggle to create reasonable doubt. As we prepared for trial, I realized the case had evolved far beyond my personal quest for justice. The evidence revealed a systemic pattern of wealthy families using their resources to enable dangerous behavior rather than address it. Bria represented dozens of privileged perpetrators who'd escaped accountability through family connections and expensive legal representation. Win or lose this trial will send a message that wealth and family status don't place anyone above the law, Jennifer promised. Your courage in coming forward despite enormous family pressure has already inspired other victims to report similar cases. The broader implications gave meaning to my suffering that went beyond personal vindication. Every piece of evidence we gathered, every witness statement we collected, every legal precedent we established would help future victims seek justice against powerful abusers. Dr. Rebecca Torres arrived at my bedside on a crisp Monday morning, carrying advanced imaging equipment that would reveal the full extent of damage Bria's attack had inflicted on my body. As the hospital's leading spinal specialist, she'd been reviewing my case with fresh perspective, applying newer diagnostic techniques that hadn't been available during my emergency treatment. Valerie, I want to conduct some additional scans using our latest MRI technology, Dr. Torres explained as technicians set up portable equipment in my room. The initial emergency imaging focused on stabilizing your spine, but I suspect we missed some crucial details about the nature and extent of your injuries. The new scans revealed a horrifying truth that reframed everything about that night. The impact pattern on my spinal column wasn't random or accidental. Someone with anatomical knowledge had deliberately targeted the exact vertebrae most likely to cause permanent paralysis while leaving me conscious enough to experience the full trauma of my destruction. This is extraordinary, Dr. Torres said, pointing to specific damage patterns on the high-resolution images. The force was applied at a precise angle to compress the L2 vertebrae while avoiding the areas that would cause immediate death. This required detailed understanding of spinal anatomy and biomechanics. The precision was surgical in its accuracy. Bria had pushed me at exactly the angle necessary to sever my spinal cord without damaging vital organs or causing immediate fatality. She'd wanted me to survive, but as a living reminder of her power and my vulnerability. The medical precision suggests your attacker studied these injury patterns extensively, Dr. Torres continued. This wasn't someone pushing in anger or panic. This was calculated targeting, designed to cause maximum disability with minimal risk of immediate death. Detective Williams joined our medical conference to understand the implications of these findings for the criminal case. Does this level of precision require formal medical training? Not necessarily, but it requires extensive study of spinal anatomy and injury mechanisms, Dr. Torres replied. Someone with pre-medical education would have learned these concepts in human biology and physiology courses. The revelation that Bria had specifically researched how to paralyze me without killing me added new dimensions of horror to her crime. This wasn't attempted murder in the heat of passion. This was deliberate, calculated maiming designed to destroy my quality of life while keeping me alive to suffer. The additional scans reveal even more concerning damage. Dr. Torres said, highlighting areas the emergency team had missed. You sustained significant internal bleeding from organ damage, traumatic brain injury, from skull impact with the concrete, and compressed fractures in your ribs that could have punctured your lungs. Each new injury discovered painted a clearer picture of how close I'd come to death that night. The emergency team's focus on my obvious spinal trauma had prevented them from identifying the full scope of damage throughout my body. You survived because the hospital staff acted quickly to address the spinal compression, Dr. Torres explained. But if you'd been alone or if medical intervention had been delayed by even 30 minutes, multiple organ failure would have been fatal. The medical analysis provided crucial evidence about premeditation and intent. Bria hadn't just pushed me downstairs in a moment of anger. She'd researched exactly how to cause permanent disability, studied the timing and location to ensure medical intervention would be available, and executed a plan designed to destroy my life while avoiding murder charges. The pattern of injuries is consistent with someone who wanted to cause maximum suffering while maintaining plausible deniability, Dr. Torres told Detective Williams. If the victim died, it would trigger intensive investigation, but paralyzing someone could be dismissed as an unfortunate accident. Catherine Mills attended the medical briefing to understand how these findings would affect my long-term recovery and support needs. The additional organ damage explains some of the complications you've been experiencing during rehabilitation. Your body has been healing from far more extensive trauma than we initially realized. The traumatic brain injury revelation was particularly significant. Subtle cognitive effects I'd attributed to stress and medication were actually symptoms of physical brain damage caused by the concrete impact. Memory formation difficulties, concentration problems, and emotional regulation challenges all stemmed from Bria's attack. The brain injury adds attempted murder charges to the case, Detective Williams noted. Severe traumatic brain injury can be fatal, and the medical evidence shows your sister's attack could reasonably have been expected to cause death or serious bodily harm. Dr. Torres compiled her findings into a comprehensive medical report that would serve as key evidence during trial. The precision of the attack, the extensive research required to execute it successfully, and the calculated nature of the targeting all supported charges of premeditated attempted murder. I've treated thousands of spinal injury cases over 20 years, and I've never seen damage this precise from an accidental fall, Dr. Torres stated in her official report. The biomechanical analysis clearly indicates deliberate application of force at specific angles designed to cause maximum spinal damage. The medical testimony would be devastating for any defense strategy based on claiming the attack was accidental. No random fall or spontaneous push could create such surgically precise damage patterns. Your sister essentially performed a calculated medical procedure designed to destroy your spinal function, Dr. Torres explained during our final consultation. The level of anatomical knowledge and planning involved rivals what we see in cases where medical professionals commit crimes using their expertise. But perhaps most disturbing was the realization that Bria's research had included studying my specific medical history and physical vulnerabilities. She'd accessed my previous medical records to understand exactly where and how to attack my body for maximum effectiveness. The digital evidence shows she researched your childhood injuries, your dance training history, and even your nutrition and fitness routines, Detective Williams reported. She built a comprehensive profile of your physical condition to optimize her attack strategy. Every aspect of my life that I'd shared with family had been weaponized against me. My dance background that created strong core muscles but left my spine vulnerable to specific types of trauma. My previous minor back injury from a car accident that had healed but created a weak point Bria could target. Even my exercise routine that she'd used to calculate my balance and reflexes. The evidence suggests months of planning and research went into this attack, Dr. Torres concluded. This wasn't sibling rivalry or family conflict. This was predatory behavior by someone who studied their victim extensively before striking. As I processed this medical evidence, the full scope of Bria's hatred became clear. She hadn't just wanted to hurt me or eliminate me as competition for our parents' affection. She'd wanted to destroy me completely, to reduce me from a functioning human being to a dependent victim who would serve as a permanent reminder of her power. The precision of her attack revealed a level of cruelty that went beyond anything I'd imagined possible, even from someone I'd known was dangerous. But it also provided irrefutable proof that would ensure justice finally prevailed. The attack came at 2:37 a.m. on a Tuesday night, when the hospital corridors held the hushed quiet that settles over medical facilities during the deepest hours of darkness. Most patients slept peacefully under the watchful care of skeleton night staff, their rooms illuminated only by the soft glow of monitoring equipment and emergency lighting that guided nurses through their rounds. I'd been struggling with insomnia since learning about the medical precision of Bria's attack, my mind unable to quiet itself enough for restorative sleep. The knowledge that my sister had researched exactly how to destroy my spinal function kept replaying in endless loops, each detail more horrifying than the last. Dr. Torres had prescribed mild sedatives to help with the anxiety-induced sleeplessness, but I'd been reluctant to take anything that might cloud my judgment during such a vulnerable time. Patricia Martinez was working her usual night shift, making rounds through the spinal rehabilitation ward with the methodical thoroughness that had earned her respect throughout the hospital system. Her 32 years of nursing experience had developed an almost supernatural ability to sense when something felt wrong, even when everything appeared normal on the surface. She'd noticed Bria's silver Honda parked in the visitor lot despite visiting hours having ended 6 hours earlier. The parking garage security cameras showed Bria entering the building through a service entrance she'd clearly researched beforehand, avoiding the main lobby where night security would have questioned her presence. Bria moved through the hospital corridors with the confidence of someone who'd studied the layout extensively. She wore dark clothing and had pulled her blonde hair back under a baseball cap, clearly attempting to avoid identification by security cameras. But she'd underestimated Patricia's dedication to patient safety and her growing suspicion about the Thompson family dynamics. The IV medication hanging beside my bed contained the standard post-surgical pain management cocktail that helped manage the chronic discomfort from my spinal injuries. The clear liquid dripped steadily through tubing that connected to a port in my arm, delivering carefully calibrated doses of medications that my doctors had prescribed after extensive consultation about drug interactions and dosage requirements. Patricia approached my room during her 2 a.m. rounds and noticed the door was slightly ajar, unusual since hospital protocol required doors to remain closed during overnight hours to minimize noise disruption for sleeping patients. She moved closer and heard the soft sound of someone moving around inside my room. Through the crack in the door, she saw a figure standing beside my bed, wearing surgical gloves and holding a syringe filled with clear liquid. The person was carefully inserting the needle into the medication port of my IV line, preparing to inject something directly into my bloodstream. Patricia recognized Bria immediately, despite her attempts at disguise. The same blonde hair that had caught her attention during previous visits, the same expensive designer clothes that seemed inappropriate for someone supposedly devastated by family tragedy, the same cold calculation in her movements that had triggered Patricia's initial suspicions. "Stop right there," Patricia commanded, stepping into the room and switching on the overhead lights. "Step away from that IV line immediately." Bria spun around the syringe still clutched in her gloved hand, her face registering shock at being discovered. For a moment, her carefully maintained mask slipped, completely revealing the cold rage underneath her performance of sisterly concern. "I was just checking on Valerie," Bria said, attempting to recover her innocent act. "She seemed to be having trouble sleeping, so I thought I'd see if her medication needed adjusting." "You're not authorized to touch medical equipment or administer any substances to patients," Patricia replied firmly, pressing the emergency call button that would summon security and additional medical staff. "Put down that syringe and remain exactly where you are. Bria glanced toward the door, clearly calculating whether she could escape before security arrived. But Patricia had positioned herself between Bria and the exit, and her years of dealing with agitated family members had taught her how to project calm authority even in dangerous situations. "What's in the syringe?" Patricia demanded. "Nothing harmful, just something to help her sleep better. She's been having such a difficult time, and I thought—" "Show me the vial you drew it from." Bria's hesitation revealed the lie. She fumbled in her jacket pocket and produced an empty insulin vial, the kind used by diabetics to manage their blood sugar levels. But I wasn't diabetic, and insulin would be potentially fatal for someone without proper medical supervision. Security arrived within minutes, followed by Dr. Torres and the night supervisor. They found Bria still holding the syringe filled with what laboratory analysis would later confirm was a massive dose of insulin enough to cause hypoglycemic coma and potential brain death in a non-diabetic patient. "She was injecting something into my IV. I told the security officers, my voice trembling with the realization of how close I'd come to another murder attempt. I was pretending to sleep when she came in." Dr. Torres immediately ordered the IV line replaced and blood tests to determine if any foreign substances had entered my system. The timing of Patricia's intervention had prevented Bria from completing the injection, but even a small amount of insulin could have caused dangerous blood sugar fluctuations. Detective Williams arrived 30 minutes later, still in pajamas and a hastily thrown-on coat. The attempted murder of a victim while they testified in an ongoing criminal case represented an escalation that demanded immediate response from law enforcement. "We found detailed plans in her jacket," Detective Williams reported after searching Bria's belongings. "Handwritten notes about hospital staff schedules, security camera locations, and medication protocols. She's been planning this for weeks." The notes revealed the sophisticated nature of Bria's second murder attempt. She'd researched insulin dosages that would cause coma without immediate obvious symptoms. She'd studied the timing of nurse rotations to identify the optimal window for sneaking into my room. She'd even researched how to make the murder appear like a medical error rather than deliberate poisoning. The plan included falsifying medical records to suggest you'd been prescribed insulin for blood sugar issues. Detective Williams continued. She intended to hack the hospital system again to create a paper trail that would make your death appear like an unfortunate medication mistake. Margaret and Robert arrived at the hospital 40 minutes later, summoned by Bria's panicked phone call from the security office where she was being held. Their immediate response followed the established pattern, complete denial followed by aggressive defense of their daughter's actions. "This is ridiculous," Margaret declared before anyone could explain the situation. "Bria was probably just trying to help with Valerie's medication. You people are turning everything into some kind of conspiracy." "Ma'am, your daughter was caught injecting insulin into a non-diabetic patient's IV line," Detective Williams explained patiently. "That constitutes attempted murder. She was trying to help her sister sleep." Robert insisted, his lawyer instincts immediately constructing a defense strategy. At worst, this was a misguided attempt to provide comfort during a difficult recovery. But the evidence spoke louder than their denials. Security cameras showed Bria's systematic avoidance of detection, her use of surgical gloves to prevent fingerprint evidence, and her careful research of medical protocols that would allow her to commit murder while avoiding suspicion. "The insulin dose she prepared would have been fatal," Dr. Torres told them bluntly. "Your daughter attempted to murder her sister for the second time in 6 weeks." Patricia provided her eyewitness account of discovering Bria in the act of preparing to inject the insulin. "She was holding the syringe directly over the medication port when I entered the room. If I'd arrived 30 seconds later, Valerie would be dead." The attempted hospital murder added new charges to Bria's growing criminal case: attempted murder in the first degree, tampering with medical equipment trespassing, and conspiracy to commit murder. But more importantly, it demonstrated that her violence was escalating rather than diminishing despite the ongoing investigation. "She can't be released on bail," Detective Williams told the judge during the emergency hearing 6 hours later. She's now attempted to murder the same victim twice, once in public and once in a controlled medical environment. There's no location where the victim would be safe if the defendant remains free. Bria was remanded to county jail without bail, her attempts at maintaining innocence undermined by the overwhelming physical evidence of premeditated murder attempts. But even as she was led away in handcuffs, she managed one final performance for her parents. "I'm sorry you had to see this," she told Margaret and Robert, tears streaming down her cheeks. "I just wanted to end her suffering. She's been in so much pain, and I thought if she could just sleep peacefully." The manipulation continued even from behind bars, but its effectiveness was finally wearing thin. Even Margaret seemed shaken by the evidence of deliberate insulin injection, though she still struggled to accept the reality of her daughter's murderous intentions. Patricia stayed with me through the remainder of the night, monitoring for any delayed effects from potential insulin exposure, and providing the emotional support I needed to process another near-death experience at my sister's hands. "She would have succeeded if you hadn't caught her," I told Patricia as dawn light filtered through my hospital window. "But I did catch her," Patricia replied with characteristic directness. "And now she's in custody where she can't hurt you or anyone else while we prepare for trial." The second murder attempt had eliminated any remaining doubt about Bria's intentions or mental state. This wasn't family conflict or sibling rivalry. This was a dangerous predator who would continue escalating her violence until someone stopped her permanently. The decision to release the security footage publicly came after extensive consultation between the prosecution team and my legal advocates. Amanda Foster argued that transparency would prevent any attempts by my family's expensive legal team to manipulate public opinion or intimidate witnesses before trial. High-profile cases involving wealthy defendants often get resolved through backroom deals that serve everyone except the victim, Amanda explained during our strategy meeting. Making the evidence public ensures accountability and prevents your parents from using their connections to make this disappear like Bria's previous crimes. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh coordinated with local news director Michael Chen to release edited versions of the hospital security footage that would protect my privacy while clearly showing the deliberate nature of Bria's attack. The timing coincided with a broader investigation into wealthy families using their resources to conceal criminal behavior by their children. Channel 7's evening news broadcast opened with anchor Sarah Peterson's introduction. Tonight at 6, exclusive security footage reveals the shocking truth behind what police now say was attempted murder disguised as a family accident. The edited footage began with Bria checking the hospital corridors to ensure privacy, then positioning herself behind my wheelchair with calculated precision. The audio captured her cruel, "You deserved it" comment as I lay bleeding at the bottom of the concrete stairs. Most damaging was the immediate aftermath showing our parents rushing past my broken body to comfort my attacker. The footage clearly shows deliberate targeting of the victim's spinal area. Forensic expert Dr. Maria Santos explained during the broadcast, "This level of precision requires anatomical knowledge and premeditation. Random falls don't create these specific injury patterns." The story exploded across social media platforms within hours of the initial broadcast. Facebook groups dedicated to family abuse survivors shared the footage with commentary about enabling parents and golden child dynamics. Twitter hashtags like Justice for Valerie and Believe Survivors trended throughout the night as thousands of people shared their own experiences with family violence. "I've never seen public response quite like this," Jennifer Walsh told me during her update call the next morning. "The combination of clear video evidence and obviously enabling parents has struck a nerve with abuse survivors across the country." The viral spread brought unexpected support from celebrities and public figures who'd experienced similar family dynamics. Actress Michelle Rodriguez posted a lengthy Instagram story about her own experiences with an abusive sibling whose violence was dismissed by relatives. Author Janet Ivanovich wrote a Twitter thread about the importance of believing victims regardless of family pressure to stay silent. But the most powerful responses came from ordinary people sharing their own stories of being scapegoated, gaslit, and sacrificed to protect favored family members. The comment sections filled with heartbreaking accounts of siblings who'd escaped accountability for violence while their victims were blamed for provoking attacks. Reading these responses is like looking into mirrors of our own experience, Emma told me as she scrolled through hundreds of supportive messages. So many people have lived through versions of what Bria did to you. The public attention created consequences my family hadn't anticipated. Robert's law firm, Henderson Kravitz and Associates, faced immediate backlash from clients who questioned their association with someone who'd enabled attempted murder. 3 major corporate clients terminated their contracts within 48 hours of the story breaking. Margaret's position as president of the Metropolitan Women's Charity Guild became untenable as board members distanced themselves from the scandal. Her longtime friends began declining social invitations and removing her from planning committees for upcoming fundraising events. "The footage is devastating for your parents' social standing," Amanda observed. "People can forgive many things, but watching parents comfort their daughter while her victim bleeds nearby crosses lines that wealthy social circles won't ignore." Bria's university expelled her immediately after the news coverage, citing violations of the Student Conduct Code and concerns about campus safety. Her sorority sisters released a statement condemning her actions and announcing they donated her membership fees to a domestic violence prevention organization. The public response generated practical support that exceeded my wildest expectations. A GoFundMe campaign for my medical expenses raised $200,000 in the first week, with donations ranging from $5 contributed by college students to $5,000 gifts from wealthy supporters who'd been moved by my story. "The financial support is remarkable," Catherine Mills reported during one of our counseling sessions. "But more importantly, the emotional validation from strangers who believe your truth is helping counteract the gaslighting you experienced from your family." Detective Williams received dozens of calls from people who'd witnessed Bria's behavior over the years, but hadn't felt empowered to report their observations. Former classmates described instances of deliberate cruelty they'd previously dismissed as typical teenage meanness. College acquaintances shared stories of Bria's manipulative tactics and financial exploitation of roommates. The public attention has encouraged witnesses to come forward who might have remained silent otherwise, Detective Williams explained. "We're building the most comprehensive case I've ever seen for pattern violence by a privileged perpetrator." National advocacy organizations took notice of the case's implications for wealthy families who used resources to enable criminal behavior rather than address it. The National Coalition Against Domestic Violence issued a statement calling for legislative reforms that would prevent sealed juvenile records from being used to hide patterns of escalating violence. Cases like Valerie Thompson's reveal how wealth and family connections can create dangerous gaps in the justice system. Coalition spokesperson Dr. Rachel Martinez told reporters, "When families prioritize reputation over safety, they become accessories to ongoing crimes." The media attention also attracted unwanted contact from my parents, who began calling hospital administrators to complain about privacy violations and demanding that I stop cooperating with news outlets. Their threats to sue the hospital for releasing information created additional legal complications that delayed their own criminal proceedings. "They're fighting the wrong battle," Jennifer Walsh observed. Instead of addressing their daughter's attempted murder charges, they're focused on controlling the narrative. It's exactly the enabling behavior that created this situation in the first place. But perhaps most gratifying was the response from other survivors who found courage to report their own family abuse situations after seeing my story. Police departments across the country received increased reports of domestic violence by family members, particularly cases involving adult children attacking siblings or parents. "Your willingness to speak publicly has given other victims permission to seek help," Dr. Rebecca Martinez from our support group told me. "Sometimes seeing one person break the silence makes it possible for dozens of others to find their voice." The viral footage also attracted attention from documentary filmmakers and true crime podcasters who wanted to explore the broader implications of family violence among wealthy Americans. Several production companies approached Amanda Foster about developing my story into educational content that could help other victims recognize manipulation patterns. The public interest ensures this case will have lasting impact beyond your personal justice, Amanda explained. The evidence and testimony we're gathering will become resources for other prosecutors handling similar cases. Local high schools began inviting speakers from domestic violence organizations to discuss recognizing warning signs of abusive family dynamics. The footage served as a powerful teaching tool about how violence can be disguised as accidents and how enabling families perpetuate dangerous cycles. The overwhelming public support provided emotional strength I desperately needed as we prepared for trial. Knowing that thousands of strangers believed my truth and supported my quest for justice helped counteract the isolation my family's abandonment had created. For the first time in my life, I felt heard, believed, and supported by a community that valued truth over family loyalty. Emma's discovery came during what should have been routine witness preparation, but it opened yet another disturbing chapter in Bria's systematic control over our entire family. Emma had been organizing her documentation of Bria's past behavior when she noticed patterns in her old journals that suggested something more sinister than typical sibling abuse. "I kept detailed records of conversations with your extended family members over the years," Emma explained as she spread notebooks across the conference table in Amanda Foster's office. "At the time, I thought I was just documenting their strange reluctance to discuss Bria's behavior, but now I realize they were all terrified of her." The journals contained years of carefully recorded observations about family gatherings where relatives seemed unusually nervous around Bria, conversations that ended abruptly when she entered rooms, and instances where family members made excuses to avoid spending time alone with her. "Your cousin Michael told me 3 years ago that Bria had been blackmailing him with photos from his bachelor party," Emma said, pointing to entries from a family wedding we'd all attended. "He was scared she'd show them to his fiancé right before their wedding if he didn't loan her money for her car payments." Amanda Foster reviewed Emma's documentation with the focused attention of someone who'd seen many cases where single perpetrators terrorized entire family systems through strategic manipulation and intimidation. Blackmail would explain how Bria maintained control over relatives who might otherwise have reported her violence, Amanda observed. Family systems often have secrets that can be weaponized by someone willing to destroy relationships for personal gain. Detective Williams joined our preparation session to understand how this new information might affect the criminal case against Bria. The revelation that she'd been systematically blackmailing family members added conspiracy and extortion charges to her growing list of crimes. "We'll need to interview every family member Emma identified in her journals," Detective Williams decided. "If Bria has been using blackmail to control their silence about her violence, that constitutes witness intimidation and obstruction of justice." The interviews revealed a family network paralyzed by fear and manipulation spanning more than a decade. Uncle David admitted that Bria had secretly recorded him discussing his tax avoidance strategies and threatened to report him to the IRS unless he supported her version of events during family conflicts. Aunt Susan confessed that Bria had evidence of her extramarital affair and had used it to force her silence about witnessing the graduation party assault on me 15 years earlier. Cousin Jennifer revealed that Bria had photos of her underage drinking at college parties and had threatened to send them to her nursing school if she didn't provide alibis for Bria's whereabouts during various incidents. "She's been running a criminal enterprise within your family structure," Amanda said after reviewing all the witness statements. "Systematic blackmail, witness intimidation, financial extortion. This goes far beyond sibling rivalry into organized criminal behavior." The pattern revealed how Bria had been able to maintain her golden child status while escalating her violence. every potential witness to her crimes had been neutralized through strategic blackmail that prevented them from reporting what they'd seen or supporting any victims who came forward. The blackmail evidence explains why your parents were so confident they could make her problems disappear, Detective Williams noted. They weren't just dealing with one incident at a time. They were managing a comprehensive system of family control that Bria had built through years of careful manipulation. Robert's participation in the conspiracy became clearer as investigators traced financial records showing suspicious payments to various family members over the years. Money had changed hands to ensure silence cooperation and false alibis that supported Bria's fabricated versions of events. Your father used his legal expertise to help coordinate the cover-ups, Amanda explained. He provided advice about statute of limitations issues, evidence preservation, and legal strategies for discrediting potential witnesses. He wasn't just an enabling parent. He was an active participant in obstruction of justice. Margaret's role involved social manipulation and emotional coercion, rather than legal or financial tactics. Family members described intense pressure campaigns where she'd guilt them into silence by claiming that reporting Bria's behavior would destroy family unity and devastate their reputations in the community. She convinced people that protecting Bria was protecting the whole family, Emma observed. Anyone who considered speaking out was made to feel like they were betraying everyone, not just defending themselves. The prosecution team realized they weren't just trying a case about attempted murder between siblings. They were exposing a multi-generational conspiracy that had enabled escalating violence through systematic intimidation and cover-ups. This case is going to set precedents for how the justice system handles wealthy families who use their resources to obstruct investigations, Jennifer Walsh told me during one of our preparation meetings. The evidence you've helped us gather will change how prosecutors approach these cases. Expert witnesses began providing testimony about how blackmail and intimidation function within family systems to silence victims and enable perpetrators. Dr. Elizabeth Morrison, a specialist in family violence dynamics, explained how golden children often develop sophisticated manipulation strategies that go undetected by outside authorities. Perpetrators like Bria understand that their family members are their most vulnerable targets because they have ongoing relationships that can be threatened. Dr. Morrison testified during pretrial hearings. By gathering compromising information about relatives, she could ensure their silence about her own criminal behavior. The revelation of Bria's blackmail network provided crucial context for understanding why my reports of abuse had been dismissed for so many years. It wasn't just that our parents preferred her over me. It was that she'd systematically neutralized every potential ally or witness who might have supported my accounts of her violence. The family members who seemed to ignore your suffering weren't necessarily complicit by choice, Catherine Mills explained during one of our counseling sessions. They were trapped in their own cycles of victimization and control. But perhaps most importantly, the blackmail evidence demonstrated that Bria's violence wasn't impulsive or emotional. She was a calculating predator who'd spent years building systems of control that would allow her to commit crimes without consequences. The level of planning and organization involved in managing multiple blackmail schemes while escalating physical violence shows clear antisocial personality traits. Forensic psychologist Dr. Amanda Chen testified, "This defendant represents an ongoing danger to anyone who might threaten her control or expose her crimes." As we prepared for trial, the prosecution team felt confident that the blackmail evidence would eliminate any lingering sympathy jurors might feel for a young woman from a prominent family. Bria wasn't a troubled daughter who'd made mistakes. She was a sophisticated criminal who'd been operating with impunity for years. "The jury will see exactly who they're dealing with," Amanda assured me. "Someone who systematically destroys lives to maintain her own power and control." The courtroom filled with an electric tension on the morning of October 15th as Judge Patricia Morrison called the case of People vs. Brianna Thompson to order. The gallery contained an unusual mix of family violence advocates, legal professionals studying the case's precedential implications, and media representatives documenting what had become a landmark prosecution of wealthy family enablement. Bria entered wearing a conservative navy suit that her parents had selected to project innocence and respectability, but the effect was undermined by the orange jumpsuit visible beneath her civilian clothes. 3 months in county jail had stripped away her polished veneer, revealing the calculating predator underneath the socialite facade. Her defense attorney, Marcus Reynolds from the prestigious firm of Reynolds, Shaw and Associates, had built his reputation representing wealthy clients in high-profile criminal cases. His opening statement followed predictable patterns: tragic family accident, unstable victim seeking revenge, misunderstood evidence taken out of context. Ladies and gentlemen of the jury, what you're going to see during this trial is a family tragedy that's been twisted into something sinister by a sister whose injuries have affected her judgment and memory. Reynolds began. Bria Thompson loved her sister Valerie deeply, and the guilt she feels about being unable to prevent this terrible accident has been manipulated by prosecutors seeking to criminalize a moment of family crisis. But District Attorney Jennifer Walsh's opening painted a dramatically different picture, supported by overwhelming evidence that had been gathered during the 6-month investigation. You're going to see security footage that shows deliberate, calculated, attempted murder, Walsh told the jury. You're going to hear from medical experts who will explain how the defendant used her anatomical knowledge to target her sister's spine with surgical precision. You're going to learn about months of planning, research, and preparation that culminated in 2 separate attempts to kill the same victim. The first week of testimony established the foundation of premeditation through digital evidence and medical analysis. IT Director Marcus Webb walked the jury through Bria's extensive computer research into spinal injuries inheritance laws and hospital security systems. The defendant's browser history shows over 300 searches related to spinal column anatomy, paralysis-causing injuries, and methods of staging accidental deaths. Webb testified. She downloaded medical textbooks, researched hospital procedures, and studied security camera placement for weeks before the attack. Dr. Rebecca Torres provided devastating medical testimony about the precision required to cause my specific injuries. Using anatomical models and biomechanical analysis, she demonstrated how only someone with detailed knowledge of spinal anatomy could have executed such a targeted attack. The force was applied at exactly the angle necessary to compress the L2 vertebrae, while avoiding immediate death, Dr. Torres explained to the jury. This level of precision is consistent with someone who studied these injury mechanisms extensively before executing the attack. The security footage screening on day 4 provided the trial's most dramatic moment. The courtroom fell silent as jurors watched Bria check the corridors, position herself behind my wheelchair, and deliberately push me down the concrete stairs. Several jury members visibly recoiled when the audio captured her "you deserved it" comment. The footage speaks for itself, Prosecutor Jennifer Walsh told the jury after the screening. This was not an accident. This was attempted murder caught on camera. But the trial's most shocking development came during cross-examination of defense witness Dr. Stephen Richards, the psychiatrist Reynolds had hired to testify about Bria's supposed mental health issues. Under questioning from Jennifer Walsh, Dr. Richards revealed information that destroyed his own credibility and Bria's defense strategy. Dr. Richards, did the defendant ever discuss her previous violent incidents during your evaluation sessions? Walsh asked. She mentioned some family conflicts, but characterized them as typical sibling disagreements. Dr. Richards replied carefully. Did she mention attempting to hack hospital computer systems to plant false psychiatric records about her victim? Reynolds stood immediately. Objection, Your Honor. This line of questioning goes beyond the scope of... Overruled, Judge Morrison said firmly. The witness will answer. Dr. Richards looked uncomfortable as he glanced toward Bria at the defense table. She did discuss concerns about her sister's credibility, but she never mentioned anything about computer hacking. Dr. Richards, I'm going to show you police reports documenting the defendant's attempt to falsify hospital records. Were you aware of this evidence when you formed your professional opinion about her mental state? The revelation that Bria had hidden crucial information from her own psychiatric expert created chaos in the courtroom. Reynolds immediately requested a conference with his client, and when they returned 20 minutes later, his expression suggested the consultation hadn't gone well. Your Honor, I need to request an emergency continuance to review newly disclosed evidence with my client, Reynolds announced. Judge Morrison's response revealed her growing frustration with the defense's apparent lack of preparation. Mr. Reynolds, this evidence has been available through discovery for months. If you weren't aware of its existence, that represents inadequate preparation rather than grounds for continuance. The trial resumed the next morning with a bombshell that no one had anticipated. Reynolds approached the bench and spoke in hushed tones with Judge Morrison for several minutes before returning to address the court. Your Honor, I'm requesting immediate withdrawal as counsel for the defendant due to irreconcilable differences and my client's failure to provide truthful information about her background and actions. The courtroom erupted as spectators realized that Bria's own attorney was abandoning her case mid-trial. Judge Morrison called for order before addressing the unprecedented situation. Mr. Reynolds, you understand that withdrawing at this point in proceedings creates substantial complications for completing this trial. Yes, Your Honor, but I cannot ethically continue representing a client who has misled me about material facts relevant to her defense. Judge Morrison granted the withdrawal motion but denied Bria's request for a continuance to secure new counsel. Ms. Thompson, you have the right to represent yourself or to proceed with court-appointed counsel, but this trial will continue as scheduled. Bria's decision to represent herself proved catastrophic for any remaining hope of avoiding conviction. Without legal training or understanding of courtroom procedure, she repeatedly violated evidence rules, antagonized witnesses, and revealed information that her attorney would have kept confidential. Her cross-examination of Emma Rodriguez demonstrated the vindictive personality that had been hidden beneath her previous performances. Isn't it true that you've been jealous of my relationship with Valerie for years? Bria demanded. No, that's not true, Emma replied calmly. Didn't you try to break up our family because you wanted to replace me as Valerie's sister? Jennifer Walsh's objection was sustained, but Bria continued her hostile questioning until Judge Morrison threatened to hold her in contempt for failing to follow courtroom protocols. The trial's climax came during Bria's own testimony when her composure finally cracked under the pressure of defending the indefensible. When Jennifer Walsh presented evidence of the insulin injection attempt, Bria's response revealed her true nature. She deserved everything that happened to her. Bria screamed at the prosecution table. Valerie was always trying to steal attention from our parents, always making herself the victim when things didn't go her way. I was just trying to end her pathetic existence so our family could finally have peace. The courtroom fell silent as Bria's mask slipped, completely revealing the cold hatred that had motivated years of violence and manipulation. Her own words provided the final piece of evidence prosecutors needed to secure maximum convictions. I should have pushed harder the first time, she continued before Judge Morrison could silence her. If that interfering nurse hadn't interrupted me at the hospital, none of us would be sitting here listening to Valerie's lies. Judge Morrison immediately called for order and instructed the jury to disregard Bria's outburst, but the damage was irreversible. She had confessed to attempted murder in open court while demonstrating complete lack of remorse for her crimes. The jury deliberated for less than 2 hours before returning guilty verdicts on all charges: attempted murder, in the first-degree assault with intent to cause great bodily harm, computer fraud identity, theft, witness intimidation, and conspiracy to obstruct justice. As the verdicts were read, Bria showed no emotion beyond cold anger at being held accountable for the first time in her life. Our parents sat in the gallery looking defeated and aged, finally confronting the reality of what their favorite daughter had become. Justice had finally arrived, but the path to healing was just beginning. The sentencing hearing 3 weeks later revealed Judge Patricia Morrison's thorough investigation into Bria's background and the additional crimes she'd committed during the trial proceedings. The courtroom atmosphere was somber as Judge Morrison prepared to deliver consequences that would reshape all our lives permanently. Before announcing the sentence, I need to address serious misconduct that came to my attention during trial proceedings. Judge Morrison began her voice, carrying the weight of 30 years on the bench. Ms. Thompson, you attempted to bribe 3 court officials and sent threatening letters to the homes of 4 jury members during deliberations. The revelation sent shockwaves through the courtroom. Even I hadn't known about these additional crimes that Bria had committed, while supposedly focused on defending herself against the original charges. Bailiff Rodriguez reported that you offered him $10,000 to allow you access to restricted areas of the courthouse. Judge Morrison continued. Court reporter Stevens documented your attempt to pay her $5,000 to alter transcripts of witness testimony. Records clerk Martinez reported your offer of $15,000 for private access to jury selection information. The bribery attempts revealed Bria's absolute refusal to accept accountability, even when facing overwhelming evidence of her crimes. She'd continued operating as if money and manipulation could solve any problem, regardless of legal and ethical boundaries. The threatening letters sent to jury members' homes contained detailed personal information about their families and implied consequences if they voted for conviction. Judge Morrison said, holding up copies of the evidence, "These actions constitute jury tampering, court corruption, and witness intimidation." District Attorney Jennifer Walsh had filed additional charges based on this courtroom misconduct, but Judge Morrison decided to address everything during a single comprehensive sentencing that would prevent Bria from manipulating any future proceedings. Ms. Thompson, your behavior throughout these proceedings has demonstrated a complete disregard for legal authority and an ongoing threat to public safety. Judge Morrison stated, your crimes represent not isolated incidents, but a pattern of escalating violence that culminated in attempted murder of your own sister. The sentencing phase included victim impact statements from everyone whose lives Bria had damaged through years of violence and manipulation. Emma spoke about the decades of guilt she'd carried for staying silent about the graduation party assault. Uncle David described the financial and emotional stress of being blackmailed for tax information that wasn't even illegal. My own statement focused on the broader implications of family violence enablement, rather than personal revenge. Bria didn't become a dangerous criminal overnight, I told the court. She was created by a family system that rewarded her violence and punished her victims. My parents' wealth and connections allowed her crimes to escalate without consequences until she felt confident enough to attempt murder in a public building with security cameras. Margaret and Robert had been arrested 2 weeks earlier on charges related to their financial crimes and obstruction of justice activities. Their expensive legal team was negotiating plea bargains that would allow them to avoid lengthy prison sentences in exchange for cooperation and financial restitution. The defendants' parents will face separate proceedings for their roles in enabling and concealing these crimes, Judge Morrison noted. However, their misconduct does not diminish Ms. Thompson's individual responsibility for her violent choices. Defense attorney Sarah Kim, the court-appointed counsel who'd replaced Reynolds after his withdrawal, made a brief argument for leniency based on Bria's age and lack of previous convictions. But the sealed juvenile records and extensive documentation of covered-up violence undermined any claims about her being a first-time offender. Your Honor, while Ms. Thompson's actions were serious, she's still a young woman with potential for rehabilitation if given appropriate mental health treatment and supervision, Attorney Kim argued. Judge Morrison's response revealed her thorough research into the case's broader implications and her understanding of the patterns involved in family violence by privileged perpetrators. Ms. Kim, I've reviewed over 50 similar cases involving wealthy defendants who committed family violence, and the pattern is consistent. Judge Morrison replied, "When families use their resources to enable criminal behavior rather than address it, the violence escalates until someone intervenes with appropriate consequences." The sentence Judge Morrison delivered reflected the maximum penalties allowed under state law for each of Bria's crimes: 25 years for attempted murder in the first degree, with additional consecutive sentences for the computer crimes, jury tampering, and witness intimidation charges. "Ms. Thompson, you will serve 25 years in state prison, with no possibility of parole for the first 15 years, Judge Morrison announced. "Your crimes represent a clear and ongoing danger to public safety that requires extended incarceration to protect potential victims." The additional charges brought Bria's total sentence to 32 years, effectively ensuring she would spend her remaining young adulthood and middle age behind bars. The sentence reflected not just punishment for her crimes against me, but accountability for the systematic pattern of violence she'd inflicted on multiple victims over many years. "Furthermore, you are permanently prohibited from contacting the victim or any family members who testified in these proceedings," Judge Morrison continued. "Violation of this order will result in additional criminal charges and extended incarceration." Bria's reaction to the sentence revealed the same cold rage that had motivated her crimes. She showed no remorse, no acknowledgement of responsibility, no recognition of the suffering she'd caused. Even facing 3 decades in prison, she remained focused on her own perceived victimization. "This is ridiculous," she said when given opportunity to address the court. "I'm being punished for trying to help my sister end her suffering. If people weren't so determined to misinterpret everything I do, none of this would have happened." Her final statement confirmed what mental health experts had concluded during their evaluations. Bria suffered from antisocial personality disorder with narcissistic features, conditions that made her fundamentally unable to empathize with others or accept responsibility for her actions. The defendant's complete lack of remorse and continued attempts to justify attempted murder demonstrate why extended incarceration is necessary, Judge Morrison observed. "She represents an ongoing threat to anyone who might challenge her control or expose her future criminal activities." As court officers led Bria away in shackles, she turned back toward the gallery where our parents sat, looking devastated and aged. For a moment, I expected her to offer some final performance of innocent suffering designed to maintain their support. Instead, she smiled. "See you in 30 years, Valerie," she called out before disappearing through the courthouse door that would separate us permanently. The smile revealed everything about who Bria really was beneath the manipulative performances she'd maintained throughout our lives. She felt no regret about trying to murder me, no shame about the lives she'd destroyed, no concern about the decades she'd spent in prison. She was exactly what Dr. Amanda Chen had diagnosed: a dangerous predator whose violence would have continued escalating until someone stopped her permanently. Justice had been served, but the work of healing was just beginning. 6 months after Bria's sentencing, I stood at the entrance of the Valerie Thompson Foundation for Family Violence Prevention, watching construction crews put finishing touches on our new headquarters in downtown Portland. The building had been designed with wheelchair accessibility as a primary consideration, featuring ramps, elevators, and adaptive technology that would serve both staff and clients with disabilities. My recovery had exceeded every medical prediction Dr. Torres had offered during those early, terrifying weeks in the hospital. Intensive physical therapy, experimental treatments, and sheer determination had restored partial sensation and mobility to my lower extremities. I would never dance again or run marathons, but I could walk short distances with assistive devices and live independently with adaptive equipment. "The neural regeneration we've documented in your case is remarkable," Dr. Torres had told me during my final appointment at the rehabilitation center. 6 months ago, I wouldn't have believed this level of recovery was possible, given the severity of your initial injuries. The Foundation's mission statement reflected everything I'd learned during my journey from victim to survivor to advocate, supporting survivors of family violence through legal advocacy, medical assistance, and community education, while working to prevent enabling behaviors that allow abuse to escalate. Emma Rodriguez had accepted the position of executive director, bringing her background in social work and her personal understanding of how family violence affects entire communities. Her first initiative involved creating educational programs for schools and community organizations about recognizing manipulation tactics and enabling behaviors. "So many people have lived through versions of what happened to you," Emma told me during our weekly planning meetings, "but they've never had words for the experience or support for seeking justice. That's what we're changing." Patricia Martinez joined our board of directors after taking early retirement from nursing. Her decades of experience advocating for vulnerable patients brought credibility and expertise that strengthened our ability to work with medical professionals and hospital administrators. Healthcare workers are often the first to recognize signs of family violence, but we need better training about how to document and report suspicious patterns, Patricia explained during one of our board presentations. The Valerie Foundation can provide that education. The Foundation's first major success involved lobbying for legislative changes that would prevent wealthy families from using sealed juvenile records to hide patterns of escalating violence. The Sunshine Protection Act, named in honor of transparency in family court proceedings, required judges to consider sealed records when making decisions about bail sentencing and treatment recommendations. Your case proved that money can't buy immunity from consequences forever, State Senator Maria Rodriguez told me during the bill signing ceremony, but it also showed how wealth and connections can delay justice long enough for violence to escalate to attempted murder. District Attorney Jennifer Walsh had been elected to the state legislature on a platform of criminal justice reform focused on family violence prevention. Her first proposed legislation would require disclosure of any previous criminal charges against defendants, even if those charges had been sealed or dismissed through plea bargains. Valerie Thompson's courage in pursuing justice despite enormous family pressure has changed how prosecutors approach these cases statewide, Jennifer told reporters during her victory speech. Her foundation continues the work of protecting future victims. The financial settlement from my parents' criminal convictions provided funding that ensured the foundation's long-term sustainability. Robert's law firm had paid significant damages for their role in concealing Bria's criminal history, while Margaret's family trust contributed additional resources as part of their plea agreement. The money can't undo the damage they caused, but it can prevent similar situations for other families, Amanda Foster had explained during the settlement negotiations. That seems like appropriate use of resources they gained through enabling criminal behavior. My relationship with extended family members had been complicated, but ultimately healing. The blackmail evidence had freed them from Bria's control, while forcing honest conversations about the fear and manipulation they'd endured for years. Many became supporters of the Foundation's work, using their own experiences to educate other families about recognizing and resisting manipulation tactics. "We all failed you by staying silent," Uncle David told me during one of our first honest conversations since the trial. "But Bria made us feel like we had no choice. Your courage gave us permission to finally tell the truth." The support group I'd started attending during my hospital recovery had evolved into a national network of survivors who provided peer counseling and advocacy training. Dr. Rebecca Martinez continued leading sessions while developing curriculum for training programs that would expand our reach to underserved communities. "Healing happens in community," Dr. Martinez always reminded us. "Isolation is what allows abuse to continue, but connection creates the strength necessary for survivors to seek justice." Emma's apartment had become our unofficial secondary office filled with case files from families seeking assistance and educational materials we were developing for distribution. Her living room walls were covered with thank you letters from survivors who'd found courage to report abuse after hearing about my case. This letter is from a woman in Ohio whose brother had been stalking and threatening her for years. Emma told me as she sorted through the week's correspondence. The police finally took her seriously after she referenced your case and the patterns of family enablement we've documented. The Foundation's legal clinic provided free representation for family violence survivors who couldn't afford attorneys to navigate criminal and civil proceedings. Amanda Foster had left her private practice to serve as our chief legal counsel, building a team of volunteers who specialized in various aspects of family law and victim advocacy. Every case we handle successfully sets precedents that help other survivors, Amanda explained during our quarterly review meeting. Your willingness to endure public scrutiny created legal pathways that didn't exist before. The educational component of our work involved developing training materials for law enforcement, medical professionals, and social workers about recognizing signs of family violence that's been concealed through wealth and social status. The materials included specific guidance about documenting suspicious injuries, preserving evidence, and supporting victims who face pressure to recant their reports. Privilege creates unique challenges for identifying and prosecuting family violence, the training manual explained. Wealthy perpetrators often have resources to silence victims, manipulate evidence, and employ legal strategies that poor defendants can't access. Media attention continued bringing national recognition to issues of family violence enablement and the role of wealth in preventing accountability. Documentary filmmaker Sarah Chen had completed a feature film about my case that premiered at several film festivals before being distributed to educational institutions. Valerie's story illustrates how family loyalty can become family complicity when it protects perpetrators instead of victims. Chen explained during interviews about the project. Her courage in speaking truth despite enormous pressure has inspired legislative reforms and cultural conversations about enabling behaviors. On the first anniversary of Bria's sentencing, I visited the cemetery where my grandmother was buried and placed fresh flowers on her grave. She would have been heartbroken to learn how her family had failed me, but I hoped she would have been proud of how I'd channeled that failure into protection for others. I wish you could see what we've built with the inheritance money Bria was so desperate to steal, I said quietly to her headstone. Your resources are helping survivors across the country find justice and safety. The afternoon sun filtered through oak trees as I sat in my wheelchair beside her grave, reflecting on everything that had changed since that terrible night in the hospital stairwell. The physical scars would never fully heal, but they'd become symbols of survival rather than sources of shame. Dr. Catherine Mills had helped me understand that recovery wasn't about returning to who I'd been before the attack. It was about becoming someone stronger, wiser, and more committed to protecting others from similar violence. Trauma can destroy people, or it can transform them into advocates who prevent other people's suffering, Catherine had told me during one of our final counseling sessions. You've chosen transformation. As I prepared to leave the cemetery, my phone buzzed with a text from Emma. 3 more families contacted the Foundation today asking for help with cases involving wealthy perpetrators. Your story continues inspiring people to seek justice. I smiled as I read the message, knowing that each new case represented another family choosing truth over false peace justice, over comfortable silence. The ripple effects of my decision to press charges against Bria continued expanding in ways I could never have anticipated. The Foundation's success proved that speaking truth about family violence could create change that extended far beyond individual cases. Every survivor who found courage to report abuse, every family that chose accountability over reputation management, every professional who received training about recognizing manipulation patterns contributed to a cultural shift that would protect future generations. I learned that biological family doesn't guarantee love or loyalty, and sometimes the people who should protect us become our greatest threats. True family consists of those who believe our truth, support our healing, and celebrate our victories. Justice delayed isn't justice denied when you have courage to speak truth and people willing to listen. My wheelchair never defined my strength. My refusal to accept abuse did. Sometimes the most loving thing we can do is protect ourselves from those who claim to love us but consistently harm us. The scars from Bria's violence became symbols of survival proof that I'd endured the worst someone could inflict and chosen to use that experience to help others. Walking away from toxic family relationships isn't betrayal, it's self-preservation. And when we choose healing over harmony, truth over reputation, justice over false peace, we create space for genuine love and authentic community to flourish. The work continues every day, and every survivor who finds their voice adds strength to our collective demand for accountability and change. Have you experienced family violence or enabling behaviors that protected perpetrators instead of victims? Your story matters, and speaking your truth can help create the changes necessary to protect future generations. What would you do if you found yourself in a situation where family loyalty conflicted with personal safety? Share your thoughts and experiences in the comments below, and don't forget to like this video if it resonated with your own journey toward healing and justice. Please subscribe to our channel for more stories about survivors who refused to accept abuse and chose transformation over silence. Your engagement helps these stories reach other people who need to know they're not alone, and that justice is possible even when it seems impossible. Share this video with anyone who might need to hear that speaking truth about family violence isn't betrayal, it's courage. Together we can create communities where survivors are believed, supported, and empowered to seek the justice they deserve. Thank you for listening to my story and for supporting survivors everywhere who choose healing over enabling truth, over reputation, and justice, over comfortable silence. May your own journey toward wholeness be filled with genuine love, authentic community, and the peace that comes from living your truth.